but it's to protect the innocent, and even if someone's guilty, protect them from being treated unfairly. What the truth is really doesn't matter. What matters is what the evidence shows. And they still think to themselves, hey, I can explain this away. It makes sense. I'll let them in. It's not a big deal. Um, you have signed your own death warrant, as far as I'm concerned. On what planet do you live where someone working for the government can be trusted with that kind of power?
Yo, what is up, YouTube? Alright, so I actually come across this video a while back, and I've really been wanting to do this for a while because it relates to the content that I put out, and is as I've stated in other videos, I have a big problem with our system and the way that our legal system, especially CPS, fails to do their job when it comes to actually protecting the kids. So when I come across this video, I watched the entire thing, and I'm gonna try to cover the whole thing. I'm gonna try not to make this too long. So try to get through this intro real quick. But when I come across it, like he really defines how CPS is not doing their job and the way that they jam a lot of men up. Now he uses the word individuals, but as we get into it and as we break it down, you're gonna see he's talking about men have to deal with these issues. So without further ado, let's get into it. So I can try not to make this video too long. I'm gonna try to get through this entire video if I have time. So let's get into it and listen to what he has to say, and we'll break it down as we go, as always.
Today, I'm going to talk to you about what to do when CPS comes to your door. Now, Child Protective Services, CPS, is called by many different names depending on what county you're in. And while I practice only in Southern California, the principles really apply to anywhere in the United States. And it's called by many names, but we're going to call it CPS because that's how it's best known. Child Protective Services, CPS. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you the biggest mistake that people make. I'm going to tell you what to do instead of making that mistake. I'm going to tell you why you should do that, and then I'm going to tell you what happens if you don't take the correct steps.
And just to touch on this real quick, like I said, I know it's probably going to be a long video, as most of mine usually are, and I try not to make them that long, but unfortunately there's just so much to cover. But I really encourage you to stay tuned for this entire video, because he's going to get into the way and what CPS will do to get men jammed up and to take your kids. And that's why I wanted to cover this video. That's why I really wanted to do this one a while back. And that's why I'm doing it now, because this is something men need to know. This is what you need to pay attention to, because as every man knows, CPS, or the legal system, snatches kids out of men's hands, with no hesitation. And this really breaks down the messed up ways that they do that. So I encourage you, please stay tuned through this entire video so you can see what I'm talking about.
And if you're watching this, then you probably already know what CPS does. CPS is the governmental entity that is responsible for protecting children from abuse or neglect. They will, when they receive an allegation of some sort of abuse or neglect, they are required under law to investigate it.
And just to touch on that one real quick, he said, they're required by law, and they really are. If they get an allegation of abuse or neglect, they're required by law to investigate that. And I've even covered already in some other videos, and I've seen firsthand that they don't do that when it comes to mothers. they will have no problem opening up an investigation against the father. But if the allegations are against the mother, they're going to be like, nah, we're not even going to mess with that. But he just clearly stated that they are required by law to investigate that. And they're not doing that. So, what what would you do? How would we be able to make sure that they're doing their job? We can't, because they're a government entity. And good luck fighting the government.
And about 80% of the time, they are not able to get the evidence they need to prosecute a case, but about 20% of the time that they will. And sometimes that can result in criminal charges. Oftentimes it can just wreak havoc on a family, and it can even result in a parent's child being permanently removed from them.
And just on that one, real quick, he said 80% they don't find anything and 20% they do. What I gather from that, and from my own personal experience and my involvement with that agency, like I said, I've seen firsthand the way that they are, which is why I have a big problem with them to begin with, because I've seen the way that they do nothing to protect the child from a mother who is doing horrible things. So to me, and like I said just a minute ago, stay tuned and he's going to explain how they get you jammed up. But the 80% of the time where they find nothing, and again, like, look at, again, I brought him up and I'm going to continue to bring him up for the same reasons. AJ Friend, CPS was involved multiple times, and that was part of the 80% where they didn't find anything. All right. And then I also covered a story where a man who was alienated from his kid based on false allegations, that was the 20% where they did find evidence. You see what I'm saying? So there was legitimate evidence against a mother that they didn't find. There was false allegations against a father, which they conveniently found.
And being adopted out to another family. So the stakes are really very, very high. A lot of people will see Child Protective Services as the heroes who are standing up for the children who can't protect themselves. And
if you see them as that, and I'm not here to down anybody for believing that, because that's what they want you to believe. They want you to believe that that's what they're out for. But if you really believe that, you're very, very naive. And again, I'm not trying to degrade anybody, but that's what this channel is dedicated to, is showing you how CPS is not doing that. And we need to start holding them accountable for that. You can't keep believing that they're really out for their child's best interest when I've shown all of these other videos that prove that they're not. And I'm going to continue to show other videos that prove that they're not out for the kids. And he's even going to explain how they're not out for the kids. So, again, pay attention. Please watch the entire thing so you can see that part.
And oftentimes, that's how people who work for CPS perceive themselves. Some people will perceive them as villains who tear families apart and lie and do all these terrible things.
That's the way I see him. I'm going to be completely honest with you. That's the way I see him. And as far as the tearing the families apart, what they're doing is, the families that they're tearing apart is they're tearing the kids away from fathers, is what they're doing. They're not tearing kids away from mothers. They're not doing that at all. And they won't, even if there's legitimate claims against the mother. They still will not do that. But again, as I stated just a minute ago, let it be a false allegation against the man, and they're going to go with that hardcore. And he's going to explain how they twist that information to make that happen. Which is why I personally see him as the villain. And the reason it wreaks havoc, and this is what they don't understand, this is what our court system does not understand. The reason it wreaks havoc on a family is because it not only hurts the father, it hurts the kids as well. Because if a father wants to be a part of his kid's life and you're doing everything you can to take that away from him, it's not just him who is paying for it. Now the kids are losing their father because you said that's what's best for them. Even if the allegations were false allegations.
Um, but the fact is that you can disagree with me on this, but from my perspective, CPS, they're not the good guys. They're also not the bad guys. What they are is they are the government. And as the government, they're like any other governmental entity. They're like the United States Postal Service, they're like the Internal Revenue Service. They're not like the military that spends $700 for a toilet cover seat. They're just a government, and they were created by people in a vacuum who have never had any contact with the system, who probably will never have any contact with them. And
That's one of the biggest main key points that he makes, or in my opinion, that he makes in this video, is that right there. They were created by people in a vacuum, people who are in this bubble, who have never had to experience the system, and like he said, probably never will. So think about that when it comes to the court system. The judge residing over your case, deciding whether or not you get to keep your kids. He's never had to deal with CPS, so he doesn't know the levels that they will go to take your kids. Lawyers do not have to deal with CPS, so they don't know the levels that CPS will go to take your kids. But the men involved know exactly how far they will go to take your kids. And when you try to um build a case around that and take that to court, the judge and the lawyer is both going to look at you like you're crazy, because again, they don't have to deal with this. So they don't understand your side of that because they've never been in that situation. They've never had to face that themselves. I have. And I've seen the flaws that CPS has. And I've even shown it again in videos in this channel. And I'm going to continue to do so. And the whole point of it is to wake up our system, because they need to understand that CPS is not perfect, and there are big discretions when it comes to how they handle investigations. So you can't, and a lot of judges will go based on whatever it is they put in their report, even if whatever they put in their report is a lie. And like I said a minute ago, he's going to cover that in a minute, as to how they will do that. So just pay attention, please do, because this is a very important video for any man who has to struggle with a bitter baby mama or bitter in-laws who is constantly calling CPS on you for this or that. This is the video you need to watch, and this is why.
it's a system that's designed to operate in a certain way on paper, but functionally, it has a tremendous. They have a tremendous amount of shortcomings. So, and that's definitely the danger. But unfortunately, we're the ones who have to deal with those imperfections. And
Exactly my point. Like I said, the judges and the lawyers residing over your case, deciding whether or not you get to keep your kids, have no idea how this actually works. On paper, this is what they're supposed to do. But that's not the way it works. And like he just said, and I full heartedly agree with what he just said, we are the ones who have to deal with that imperfection. The unfortunate imperfection, because men are the ones who lose out on that. Women do not lose out on that. That benefits women. And it is a huge disadvantage towards men.
well, what kind of imperfections are we talking about? Well, we're talking. It's a government agency, and it's run by people. People are subject to their biases. They're subject to their prejudices, their filters, their preconceptions. They're also subject to just making simple factual mistakes, and they are subject. if the circumstances are right, they're subject to lying. And
That is one of the main things I wanted y'all to catch in this video, or that I wanted y'all to hear. And notice the first two things that he listed, followed by the last thing that he listed. All right, the biases and the prejudice mixed with their perception, or okay, yeah, their perception and the fact that under the right circumstances, they will also lie. So this is an agency who is out to protect kids, but yet they will lie on a public forum in order to take your kids because they know the judge is going to believe them over you, even if you didn't do anything wrong. They can put whatever they want to in that report, and that is what's going to affect whether or not you get to keep your kids. And that is going to be based on their bias and their prejudice. And most people, and I've even stated this in some of my comments on other videos, that in this town, the town that I live in, they are stuck in that traditional way. So everybody in this town, in the legal system, is biased against putting a child in a father's care, even if the mother is bad for the child. They all want to be the knight in shining armor. They all want to be the ones who protect the mother. You know what I mean? And so they would literally do everything they can to make sure that child does not get removed from a mother, even if she is doing horrible things to this kid. And they have no problem lying on a form in order to take a child away from the father. That's how it works in this town, and that's the way it works in a lot of towns across the state. Or I mean, across the country, or the state too, but across the country. There are very few court systems who have adapted a modern mindset that not all mothers are good mothers. Very, very few court systems have adopted that mindset. The majority of them are stuck in that traditional form, like where for the certain amount of, for the first 5 years of a child's life, they're better off left with a mother, and that's just the way they are. Like they're stuck in that traditional way where the woman is a stay-at-home mom. But you tell me, if you've got a stay-at-home mom who does not have a job, doesn't have a career or anything really going for her, but you take a dad who is a hard worker, full-time job, and managing his bills on his own, which one of those two do you think is going to be able to take care of that child better? The one without a job or the one with a job? But yet the people in this county seem to think the one without the job can take better care of the child than the one with the job. That's how this works. And that's not fair to the fathers involved. It's not fair to the kids involved. And that's my biggest issue, is how all of this affects the kids in the end. Because a lot of these kids are being stripped away from dads who want to be there. Good, loving dads who want to be actively involved in their kid's life but can't because CPS lied on a form and the judge believed it.
And those mistakes, those prejudices, those filters, those lies, they can destroy, absolutely destroy individuals. And CPS is in a position, they're in a position to do that, unfortunately.
Look at it. See what I mean? Exactly what I was saying. Like they're in the position they could do that. They could destroy your entire life if they want to. And their investigation, or the outcome of their investigation, is going to be based on their bias or their prejudice. And as I stated, in this town and many other towns across the country, they're biased against fathers raising their kids. It really has nothing to do with what is best for the kid. Even though that's supposed to be their job. That's the whole reason the agency was developed in the first place, was to protect the kids and do what is best for the kids to make sure that they are safe. And as I pointed out, and I'm going to continue to point out through this video and other videos, I have shown plenty of cases where they have not done that. All right, so let's move on. I'm not trying to keep interrupting this much, but I mean, there's just a lot of very key points that he's making and that I can make on that from personal experience. I'm really trying to get through this as quick as I can. If this turns out to be a long video, I apologize, but this really is a must watch for any man dealing with this situation.
It's it's something we hope doesn't happen, but anyone who's worked in this arena knows that this does happen. Um, I saw something very interesting some time ago, which was it was a training seminar. It was designed for people who were at various stages of working with CPS and working in an investigatory setting. And the question was asked: how many of you believe that you have ever falsely accused, or to use the proper legal language, petitioned uh, allegations of abuse or neglect against a parent? How many of you believe you have ever personally done that? And not a single person in the room raised their hand. So, uh, any intelligent person knows that uh, just as a matter of there simply has to be a mistake. There's no way that none of these people have ever done this ever. It's just not possible.
Just real quick on that one. The way it sounds, man, I like to break it down. He's talking about a training seminar for people involved in that field, the child protective field. And he said the question was asked: have any of you ever put false made a false report that resulted in a child being removed from the parent? And he said parent, but like I said, we all know what that means. He's talking about a child being removed from fathers, because as I stated, they don't do that to mothers. They don't remove a child from a mother. They just don't. And he said not one of them raised their hand, and that's got to be a mistake, because you can't tell me out of all of these kids who have been taken away from their I'm just gonna say dads, because that's what it is. They're, like I said, they're not taking them away. So I'm just gonna say dads. So with all the kids who have been taken away from their dads, you cannot honestly believe that not one of those reports has some false information in it. And yet, nobody in the agency is going to admit that. Because, as he stated just a few minutes ago, they pretend that they're the good guys. They're the heroes. They're the ones protecting the kids. And they can't push that narrative if they're admitting to putting in false claims in a report that resulted in a child being removed from the father. You see what I mean? Like, because that makes them the bad guy. And like I said, in my opinion, they are. But they can't push that narrative that they're the good guy out to protect the kids and then admit to making false reports at the same time, because that just doesn't go together. That's what that means.
And there's that lack of awareness, though, and that's part of the humanity. Is these people simply don't, when they're making a mistake, they don't know it, because the skill set required to identify the mistake is also the same skill set that would prevent the mistake from happening in the first place. So,
To what that sounds to me, and I've actually mentioned in some other videos, and actually done a video on narcissism, but to me, that's what that sounds like. It sounds like a high case of narcissism, because a narcissist will never admit that they did something wrong. Everything that they do, even all of their horrible behavior, is going to be somebody else's fault. If they cheated on you, it's because you didn't give them enough of this or enough of that or whatever. So it's never going to be their fault. And as long as it's always somebody else's fault, you're going to continue to make the same mistakes, because you're not willing to acknowledge the fact that you messed up. And that is the clear definition, one of the telltale signs of narcissism. So if that's the case, And it actually did not occur to me until I saw this video. If that's the case, if narcissists are working as CPS agents or investigators, it's no wonder that there are so many problems with kids being taken from their dads. And it's no wonder that they don't catch their mistakes because, like I said, narcissists will never admit that they made a mistake. It's always somebody else's fault. And if you can't admit that you messed up, how can you take the necessary precautions to make sure that it doesn't happen again? Or even if you could admit that you made a mistake, like he said, that the skill set that is required to to acknowledge that you made a mistake is also the same skill set that it would require to prevent the mistake from happening in the first place. So without either or, if you can't admit you messed up, you can't fix the problem. And that in itself is a big, big problem. Because that's why so many families, and again, the men and the kids, that's why when I say families, that's what I mean. Because, like I said, they don't take a child away from a mother. So when I say families being ripped apart, that's what I mean, the fathers and the kids. That's why so many families are being ripped apart, is because CPS is making all of these mistakes and refuse to acknowledge that they messed up. And it takes a case like AJ Friend, as I brought up before, and as I'm going to continue to bring up, it takes a case like AJ Friend. It took a child's death for them to finally say, damn, that was my bad. And when it comes to a child's life, I mean, the boy was only 5 years old. When it comes to a child's life and he dies because you did nothing to protect him, and the best thing you can say is, damn, that was my bad. Like, really? Really? Damn, my bad. And the whole, like, it all comes down to the fact that none of these people have to deal with these issues. None of these people have to bury their own kids. So they don't see it as a problem. The people who are burying their own kids, they're the ones who are having to deal with the injustice in the system. And it's really not fair to the dads or the kids. Because why would you let it come to that before you finally realize you messed up? Like, why does it have to get that bad? AJ had physical bruises that they refused to say this person caused these bruises. Even if he said this is what happened, they still didn't believe him. They still said, nah, we can't prove it. But you take a father with false allegations, they say, oh, we could prove he did it, even if he didn't do it. That's how they work. And the only ones, the main ones who are paying the price are the kids. Because if they die, their life is cut short. And it was your job to make sure that doesn't happen in the first place. And my bad or I'm sorry, it just doesn't cut it. And even a lawsuit is not going to fix the problem. Because the kid is still gone and the father is still left without a child.
By definition, this is going to happen. They're not going to have any awareness of it, so they are always going to think that they're the good guys. But they're not. They're the government, and that's part of their imperfection. So, fortunately, because they are the government.
See what I mean? They're never going to admit it because they always think they're the good guys. As long as they can't admit it, more kids are going to suffer. And you tell me how that's fair to them.
Though, that we have certain rights, and these rights exist for the purpose of protecting the innocent, and for those who are in fact guilty, it's for protecting them against an unfair outcome, either overly burdensome or overreactive or however you want to look at it. But
I just find that part really funny. And I just wanted to touch on that really quickly, really briefly, is that we have the right, they're there to protect the innocent from being treated unfairly, and yet every man that has ever been through a custody battle or any um, custody issue in the system knows we're treated unfairly no matter what. So the laws are there, but they might as well not be because we're still treated unfairly.
it's to protect the innocent, and even if someone's guilty, protect them from being treated unfairly, even in the context of that guilt. So we do have those protections in place, and and it's important that we have that proportional response. So what I want to do before talking about what the right is and how to respond, I'm going to give you an example. So let's imagine this. Let's imagine that you have two boys. Okay.
This is a part I wanted y'all to really hear, especially the men watching this, and please pay close attention, because this is how messed up the CPS system is, and this is how they will twist the situation to fit whatever they want it to say.
Okay, you have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and you also have a crazy mother-in-law who is always complaining that you are abusing the kids, and you're too rough with them, and you hit them, and you're leaving bruises. And your 4-year-old just recently hit his head on the table, and she thinks that you hit him on purpose. And so you have this person out here saying, "Hey, this is going on. This is going on." And so a CPS, one evening, you're at home with your boys, and a CPS social worker comes to the door. And as soon as they identify themselves, you think to yourself, "Oh, this is my mother-in-law. That's what's going on." And the CPS social worker introduces, we'll make it a female, introduces herself, and she says, "Hey, just to let you know, I am investigating some allegations involving your kids. I know you probably didn't do anything wrong, but we have to investigate all of these, and this is probably just going to take a few minutes, but."
Pay close attention to what he said right there, the way they introduce themselves, because he's going to mention later on how they will use that in order to rope you in order to get evidence to use against you.
I'd like to come in and just talk to you and talk to your kids and just clear up what's going on here, and then I'll be on my way. Would it be okay if I just came in for a little bit? So the biggest mistake that people tend to make is they tend to think to themselves, sure, I haven't done anything wrong, I can explain this away.
And that's typically an understandable response. If you're innocent, if you didn't do anything wrong, you would be like, sure, why not? I've got nothing to hide, I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't do what I'm being accused of doing, so sure, not a problem. But listen to how they flip it around, something like that, and that's, like I said, that's a typically normal response. It makes sense, understandable, but it's the way that they manipulate the situation that makes that the wrong decision, and he's going to explain how that works.
That is the wrong answer. That is absolutely the wrong answer. That's the single biggest mistake that people make, and it's that belief that has resulted in some really terrible outcomes. With due respect to anyone who's watching this, to anyone who watches this and ignores my admonishment, and then experiences this and has someone come to their door and they still think to themselves, hey, I can explain this away, it makes sense, I'll let them in, it's not a big deal, you have signed your own death warrant as far as I'm concerned.
And keep in mind, this is an attorney saying this. I mean, and that's a bold statement to make is that by letting them in order to prove your innocence, you're still signing your own death warrant, even if you're innocent. And again, he's going to explain how. So pay attention.
Because you've been in war, you've been warned. Um, it's absolutely the biggest mistake, because when you're dealing with these situations, you're not just dealing. You're not. What the truth is really doesn't matter. What matters is what the evidence shows. For CPS to take any sort of action at all involving you or your children, they have to collect evidence. And if you do nothing, if you do not talk to them, if you don't cooperate with them, then they have no. They usually have no evidence, and they cannot move forward in your case. So by simply inviting them in, you are opening up a Pandora's box because now you are giving them evidence. There's nothing that you can give them that's going to make your situation better. And the biggest problem is that you, more often than not, will just end up making things worse. And I'll give you some examples for that.
That really, honestly, to me, sounds like a damned if you do and damned if you don't situation. Because if they come knocking on your door and they say, hey, can we come in and talk to you and this and that, if you say no, and go back to what he said, is like they're individuals, so they have their biases, their prejudice, their perceptions, and everything else. So if you say no, they're liable to perceive that as guilt. You have something to hide, so that's why you don't want to talk to them. And they can put that in their report. But then if you invite them in, this is what happens.
So now you've said to the social worker, hey, come on in. Sure, we'll take a few minutes. I have nothing to hide. Come on in. I have nothing to hide. And so the social worker comes in. And the social worker comes in and they immediately make a few observations. Number one, you have an outlet on the wall that does not have child protective covers on it. From dinner, you have a knife on the table, sitting on the kitchen table. Your 2-year-old just soiled himself and he needs a diaper change. And also in one of the adjacent rooms, there's a pile of dirty laundry. Without you having even said a single word, without you answering a single question, you have now given that social worker ammunition that they can put into a report, and if they deem necessary, use as leverage against you and evidence of your abuse or neglect with your kids.
So you see why I say that's a damned if you do and damned if you don't situation? So, like you said, without you having to say a word, without you answering a single question, they found all this little nitpick stuff that they can literally use against you to prove that you're neglecting your kids. and to me, it's like when he mentioned like the soiled diaper. Okay, what do you expect me to do? Change him in front of you? And with the dirty laundry, sometimes I don't do laundry till after my kid goes to sleep. And if a social worker's coming by, obviously she's coming by during the day, so maybe I haven't gotten around to that yet. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to do it. And a pile of dirty laundry doesn't mean a huge, big pile of dirty laundry. That just means a pile of dirty laundry. But they will take little bitty things like that and nitpick. And like he said, use it as leverage against you if they see fit. If that's what they decide they want to do, which goes back to their bias and their prejudice and their perception.
The social worker writes down, home is severely inadequate, safety inadequate, sharp knives within immediate reach of children, unprotected electrical outlets, signs of lack of basic hygiene, including a pile of laundry, child 2-year-old was heavily soiled and smelled terrible at time of arrival. All of these things can be used to paint a portrait of you, an unfavorable portrait of you later on, if they decide that, hey, there's something here. And you have
You see, just one thing I want to note right there. He said all of this can be used to paint an unfavorable portrait of you. Now keep that in mind and go back to what he said about the seminar and how everybody there said that none of them have ever made false reports in order to remove a child from the home. And he's clearly giving you examples on how they do that. So keep that in mind.
have to keep in mind with all these things as well, as I describe this, it's at all times you're subject to the investigating social workers' perceptions. You may say, okay, how can they can't. Um, Everything is going to be everything is going to have to go through their lens. All the information that's being provided is going through their lens. So how things really are doesn't really matter so much as it does how this person who you've never met, who thinks you might be a child abuser, how this person is perceiving and portraying you. And you don't know what their agenda is. On what planet do you live where someone working for the government can be trusted with that kind of power simply because
Honestly, I could not have said that better myself. I really couldn't. And so it really puts that into perspective. All right, so if you go back to a video I posted about the guy who was alienated from his child based on false allegations, he stated to the court, the man stated to the court that he received a call from CPS. They said, "Hey, we need you to come up here. We need you to ask you a few questions, and this and that." And he said by the time he got there, they already presumed him guilty, and the accusations that were being made against him were false allegations of trying to choose my words carefully for YouTube, but it was some actual assault or something along that lines. And so they automatically presumed him guilty based on the information that the bitter baby mother gave them. This was already decided that he was guilty before they even talked to him.
I was called in by a CPS investigator, and I was judged, tried, and convicted in her mind as being extremely guilty before I even arrived at the Collin County CPS office.
Standards and the injustice that we have to deal with in our system.
as they passed a civil service exam and were given a badge. So it's just not you're just absolutely, even without speaking, just by letting them into the home, you're creating this risk and giving them this potential for evidence that is just totally unnecessary. Why even give them the opportunity to make an incorrect observation if not giving them.
That's why I really encouraged everybody to watch this whole thing, because like I said, a lot of the times when these false accusations are made against you, you go into it with that mindset, that I have nothing to hide, so why not? I can explain this away, it will go away, no problem, right? Well, and it turns into a big problem, because now you end up losing your kids over some nitpicking things that were twisted to fit whatever the social worker wanted it to say. And as he stated, the truth doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is what the evidence shows. And what the evidence shows is what the investigator wants it to show. So the truth is irrelevant. The only thing that is relevant is what this social worker says. And that is what determines on whether or not you get to keep your kids. And take that back to the law or the rights that he was talking about, where the rights are there to protect us from being treated unfairly, yet he's explaining exactly how we are treated unfairly.
The observation is an option, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But okay, so you've let the social worker into the home. Social worker says, okay, no outlet covers, open knife, dirty diapers, dirty clothes. Great start. You're off to a great start. And now the social worker starts to ask you questions. So the social worker says, okay, so tell me, how do you discipline your children? And you say, oh, well, it's okay to spank, generally speaking. It's okay to spank your child if you don't leave a mark, and at least 49 of the 50 states that's currently the case. And you say, yeah, I spank them occasionally. That's it. And the social worker asks, okay, well, have they ever been hurt in your care? And you say, oh, well, about a week ago, we were playing tag on the couch, and I went to tag my 2-year-old, and I hit him, and he fell off the couch, but he was okay. It left a mark, just a little bit of a mark, but wasn't that big of a deal. So here's what just happened in that conversation. Number one, you admitted to striking your child on a regular basis. Number two, you admitted to hitting your child so hard last week that it knocked them off the couch and it left a physical injury on them. So, the social worker, you're giving this information, and this information can be construed or warped however it needs to be in order to accomplish whatever they feel is right for your situation.
You see what I mean? So they could twist the evidence into whatever they wanted to say. And so, excuse me. But and one of the biggest things I caught there was the way he was talking about he was playing tag with his kid. He tagged his 2-year-old. The kid fell off the couch. Couches are not that wide anyway. I've seen my kid fall off the couch, and obviously I was right there to catch him, as soon as he hit the floor, but it happens, you know what I mean? But the social worker can take that and flip it around as if you pushed the kid off the couch. You were the reason the kid fell. You were the reason these marks happened. But then, as I stated, go back to the AJ Friend case, where there was clear marks of what was happening there. And he specifically told the caseworker what had happened. And they didn't believe him. They didn't listen to him. They didn't put that in their report. You see what I mean? Like, they could twist, and that's why I feel like he's talking about men here, is because that's the way they will do. That's the way CPS will do. They will twist things to make the man look like the bad parent. And they will do everything they can to make sure the woman does not look guilty. You see how that works? Do you see the difference there? There was legitimate claims against AJ Friend, or with AJ Friend, and he clearly stated what had happened. And then they take a false allegation, and you say something innocent like, yeah, we were playing tag, because I play with my kid too. You know what I mean? Yeah, we were playing tag, and I accidentally hit him. He fell off the couch. It caused a physical injury. Now they. So I mean, that's the double standards that is placed on men and women. Like, they can literally, physically do horrible things to kids. Women can physically do horrible things to kids, and they will completely overlook that. Men could do something so innocent as to playing with your kids, but maybe a little rough. But I mean, if you got 2 boys, I mean, come on. Boys are going to get boo-boos. Boys are boys. You know what I mean? It's going to happen. They're going to get scrapes. They're going to get boo-boos. It's going to happen. All right? But they can take that little bit, and they can say, oh, he's no good for this child because of this. But they can look at the evidence. Like, And I'm gonna actually, I'll put one of the injuries. I'll put some pictures of AJ in this video when I edit it to show you these are the bruises that happened to him. And they overlook that. But they take some minor stuff like this, like what he was describing, and they use that as a way to take a child away from a father. That's how messed up our system is. That is how one sided our system is. And he clearly stated in the beginning of this video that the laws are there to protect us from being treated unfairly. And yet we're still being treated unfairly.
And that's based on how they perceive your situation. So you're already just simple things. You're just giving them this terrible ammunition. So now you see the social worker starting to write down these notes on her pad, and she's writing with increasing intensity, and you start to say to yourself, well, I'm talking about, spanking my kids and knocking them off, and well, it seems fine to me. It's coming out of my mouth, and I know I haven't done anything wrong. But still, maybe I'll just ask, and you say, so is it, I see you're taking these notes. Is it okay if I record this conversation? And the social worker says, no, we don't allow that. So,
and that in itself should be a red flag. If you ask the social worker, hey, do you mind if I record this conversation? And they say no, that in itself should be a red flag. And two, to add to that, most states, and I know for a fact it's not all states, but I'm not entirely sure what states have the one-party consent law. I know the state that I live in do. So if somebody comes into my house, as long as I'm a part of that conversation, the only consent I need to record is mine. And I actually did do that. I recorded all the conversations between me and the caseworkers because I was legally able to do that. Now, there are some states that do not have a one-party consent law, which means you have to have the consent from everybody in that party before you can have legal rights to record. And if you're on that part, I would encourage you to look up your state law on that part, on whether or not you're legally able to record based on the one-party consent. Because even if they say no, if you're covered under the one-party consent law, you can still record. Because, like I said, in my state, and I already knew it before the caseworker got here, that it was a one-party consent law or a one-party consent state. And so I didn't ask if it was okay for me to record. I just simply told them this is being recorded. But like I said, if they say no, that in itself is a red flag, and you should probably seek legal advice. And he's actually going to mention that later on. So let's get to that. But that's just my input on that part.
Now the social worker interprets you as becoming hostile and defensive, and they write down in their notes, parent admits that they regularly strike their children, and last week struck the child so hard that it knocked them off the couch, and the 2-year-old suffered a visible injury as a result.
And that in itself is that's a stretch. And you know that anybody who has kids, y'all know how unbalanced a 2-year-old can be, especially when you're playing. Because they still haven't developed that yet. You know what I mean? They're still working on that. And so if you happen to... And it doesn't take a whole lot of force to actually, like me, I'm a little more careful. I don't really go that hard with him. But like you see the way he's talking about, the way that they twist it into making you look like the bad guy. And this is why I say y'all need to watch this, because this is what they will do to you. This is how they will ruin your life, and this is how they will take your kids, even if you're innocent.
upon being questioned, the parents became hostile and defensive, and wanted to record the conversation. When I
See, a simple question is, can I record? Do you mind if I record? They note that as hostile and defensive. And really, that's not hostile and defensive. That's protection for yourself. That's what that is. But like he stated, and like I said, or like I commented on, is the truth doesn't matter. The truth is what they say it is.
said no, the parents became visibly angry. Though they did not speak those words, they nonetheless became visibly angry and reluctant to continue the conversation. And
that's the part, just real quick on that one, that's the part where I said it's damned if you do and damned if you don't, where he said he was reluctant to continue the conversation. So if you tell them no, I don't want to talk to you, they're going to perceive it as you're guilty anyway. You're hostile, you're defensive, and like I said, it's all about how they want to portray you. And it's all about what they want to put in their report. The truth does not matter. The evidence, which is what they say it is what matters. So if you say no, they're going to presume that you're guilty or that you're hiding something. But if you say yes, they're going to come in there and they're going to nitpick at every little thing and do everything they can to make you look like the bad guy. And go back to some of my other videos. Please do. Watch those. And you tell me that the CPS done the same thing to those women. If you see a similarity in between this and what they did to those women, please let me know. I'd love to hear that.
As terrible and as warped as that sounds, there's nothing that I said there that actually is technically objectively untrue. It's also, to an extent, it's mixing certain objective elements that maybe are being recorded in an unfair manner, but still factually correct, coupled with the subjective perceptions of the social worker. So now you're this hostile, angry, defensive person who's admitting to hitting their children, who's living in this unsafe environment, and so it just keeps getting deeper and deeper, and so then the social worker wants to talk to your 4-year-old, and wants to talk to them alone. And this is a 4-year-old who, if you ask them what they had for breakfast, they would probably say dragons. They had dragons for breakfast, okay? It's coming from a 4-year-old. It's not really... 4-year-olds say things. So aside from, now you're not only just dealing with the twisting or the filters or the misperceptions, now you're also dealing with a 4-year-old who may not be able to convey information so accurately. So the social worker takes the 4-year-old aside and says, hey, does your mom or dad ever, does he ever hit you or your younger brother? And your 4-year-old says, yes, I all the time I get boo-boos like on my head. Why?
And again, this is why I think he's talking about dads, is because when he was given the example, he said, does your mom or dad ever hit you? And the child said yes. As I mentioned earlier in this video, in other videos, AJ Friends said the same thing about his mom. Did they do anything about that? No, they didn't. But yeah, if a child says that about the dad, that is something they're going to take serious, even if it comes from a 4-year-old. You see the double standards here? This is why our system is so messed up.
Because 4-year-olds say anything. He hit us out on the table a couple weeks ago, and that's why the mother-in-law got upset in the first place. So the social worker goes back and says, hey, I asked you about the kids getting hurt. You didn't tell me anything about your 4-year-old getting hit. Anything you want to explain to me? And you say, well, yeah, you know that your mother-in-law probably initiated this, and she's always accusing you of hitting the children. So naturally, we're talking about the event with the table, and you say, you innocently reply, yes, I know I didn't say it, but my son hit his head. He hit his head, but it was on the table, and it was a mistake. But other than that, that's the only time he's ever been hit. Well, here's the problem. Number one, the social worker is perceiving the spanking as hitting, so now you've contradicted yourself for saying yes, I hit the child occasionally, but and now you're saying no, I've never hit the child, and you're talking about the hitting on the table and said, well, that's interesting because I asked what you know about the child being hit. I did not say being hit by a person, nor did I even say hit on the head, and yet you're defending yourself about you hitting him, and you're the one who's bringing up hitting him on the head. So isn't that interesting that the child saying, hey, I got hit on the head, mother-in-law saying, hey, he's hitting the child on the head, and now you're saying, oh, I don't know anything about the child. I never hit him on the head. It was the table that hit him on the head, and I never mentioned him being hit on the head to you. So it's all coming together as this it's all coming together as this terrible case against you. And frankly, you're looking more and more guilty, and you're trying to, you just keep trying to dig yourself out. And this really happens.
You see what I mean? Is like, this is the way they will twist that. And go back to the beginning when he started this example, is they showed up and I'm sure you didn't do anything, but we just want to clear this up. And you thinking, well, you didn't do anything wrong, so yeah, you can explain this away. So you invite the caseworker in, and this is what happens. It gets snowballed into this. Something so innocent that you didn't even do got snowballed into now you're guilty because of the perceptions of the investigator. And it's the way that they get you to draw out this information that makes you look guilty. You see what I mean? So, and that's the way they will twist this. And they do not do this when it comes to women. This is why I say, when he says individuals, he's talking about men. This is why I say that, is because they don't do that to women. They will only twist the circumstances or the situation like this against men, in order to remove the kids from a man's care. Because, as I stated, the people in this county and many other counties around the country don't believe that a man can do the job just as good as a woman can. The reality is there are many, many men out there that can do the job way better than women can. But the bias and the prejudice of the investigators refuse to acknowledge that. And this is how they do their investigations. This is how they conduct their investigations. And this is why so many kids are being stripped away from their fathers.
Really happens in these cases. It happens to genuinely innocent people. It happens to people who simply have... sometimes they've just made a mistake that's not that bad, but it's turned into something that's just so much worse because of how the information can be, for lack of a better word, twisted.
Bam. And this is coming from an attorney. Somebody who is innocent. And yet the information was twisted, and he said, for lack of a better term, twisted to fit whatever the caseworker wanted it to say. And so go back to the very beginning of this video, and I'm going to end it on this note. I'll put the link in the description if you want to watch the entire video. I strongly encourage you, if you're a man, like I said, going through this type of situation, I strongly encourage you to watch his channel. He's got some other videos talking about, how to beat CPS and this and that. So I'll put his name up on here when I edit it, and I'll also leave the link to this video in the description. But I mean, he you started off as innocent. You thought you were going to explain this away. You invited him in and said, yeah, sure, there's no problem. And all this gets twisted to be held against you to make you look guilty. So you're innocent, but they're going to twist it in a way so that you look guilty, so that they can take your kids away from you permanently, as to prove you are an unfit dad. And again, I already explained why I say that, but that's what it is. They do this to prove that you are an unfit dad. All right, and my whole issue with this is they will go through that length to remove a child away from a good dad who didn't do anything wrong. And yet they will do the same thing. They will twist the evidence against a guilty mother to prove that she didn't do anything wrong. You see what I mean? All right, so they will take factual evidence, proof, pictures, bruises, everything against a woman, and they will twist that evidence to make her look innocent. They will take an innocent man who has no proof, no picture, no anything, and they will twist the facts to make him look guilty. So at what part of that is CPS protecting the kids? It goes back to their bias and their prejudice and their perception. And men are really screwed in this no matter what. And it's really not fair to the dads. It's really not fair to the kids. Because from what I've seen based on his examples and the way that they twisted this evidence, and from what I've seen in the videos that I posted and the stories that I've come across that I haven't posted, they don't care about the kids. They want to take a child away from a father, and they want to make sure a child does not get removed from a mother. Doesn't matter how innocent he is, and it doesn't matter how guilty she is. And that is not fair to the kids, because they're the ones who pay for it in the end. So when he's going through all this evidence, the one thing I don't hear is how removing that child from an innocent man would actually benefit those kids. What I hear is somebody who is twisting little bitty nitpick stuff in order to make you look guilty so that they can take your kids. That's what I hear. I don't hear an agency looking out for a child's best interest. I hear an agency trying to flip the evidence to take those kids. That's what I hear. That's what I see. So everybody, I hope you made it this far in the video. I really hope you do, because this was a video that needs to be seen. Again, I'll leave the link if you want to see the entire video. I encourage you to do so. I encourage you to check out this man's channel if you're a man who is going through situations like this, because he's got some really good insights, really good information that can help you figure out what you need to do to resolve your situation. So please leave your comments. Let me know what you think about all this. If I missed anything, if you disagree with me, or if you agree with me, that's what the comment section's for. And if you did like the video, if you made it this far, I really do greatly appreciate it if you made it this far. But if you like the video, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. As always, there's more to come, and as always, I will see y'all in the next one. Y'all have a good one.